What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to episode 3 of the Two Guys Watching Football podcast. My name is Cole Jackson, your co-guy, and I am bringing back our first recurring guest, back by popular demand. Everyone loved him so much, we had to bring him back the very next week. We got Dennard Melton at Dennard13. Dennard, what's going on, man?
Not much, man. Just happy to be back. Thanks for all the love, guys. Just here talking some good football and good defensive football. So excited to continue the conversation.
There it is. And that leads us into our topic. So we are back talking about the bread and butter of your Baltimore Ravens. We are going to talk about defense and dive into a very fun topic, something that I think has always been an interesting discussion. It's the 3-4 versus the 4-3 base defense. It's one of those things where we're going to get into this a little bit, but teams are running multiple fronts nowadays. Does it matter what your base is? Well, we're going to get into a little bit where, even though it doesn't matter because you're reducing into sub packages or, you're playing multiple fronts, the way you build your team, the way you do reduce, the skill sets you have to run different packages, it all adds up and makes a difference. And, just to set the tone here with a little bit of context. So, I got to give a shout out to King Moose at Yoshi 2052 for hitting me with the numbers. Your go-to Ravens stat guy for all things packages related. Question to him was, in the 2020 season, what were the Ravens using? So we are looking at the base defense of the Baltimore Ravens defense being used in 23% of snaps, the nickel defense being used in 60% of snaps, and the dime defense being used in 16% of snaps. And for those doing math at home, because I did do the math, there is 1% remaining, and that's some funky packages that add up to about 10, 15, 20 plays, maybe even less, but that's the extra 1%. So, that's really what we're looking at. 23% of your base defense snaps. That's still a pretty significant number. So, Dennard, when we had you on last week, we asked you kind of what your history was. I know you're my go-to guy for defense. Just give us, I know you said it last week, but if we have new listeners, briefly give us a little bit of an update, what your background is, especially on the defensive side of the ball where, you're my go-to.
So, I am a graduate of James Madison University, repping it today. For my softball girls, congratulations going to the College World Series. That's pretty cool. But I played 4 years at JMU, played middle linebacker, played Sam linebacker, played Will linebacker, called the signals for the defense. So obviously very much involved in terms of game plan and understanding the entire defense as a whole, because I got to know what everybody's doing, particularly in game situations. Very important. But also after I left college, I joined up with my old high school coach there for about 4 or 5 years, was the defensive coordinator there for about 4 years. So obviously get some game planning, understand what, offenses are trying to do to you. But that's just kind of a little bit about my background.
Oh, that's perfect, man. And that's really what we're looking to do here. Mike and I. Mike couldn't be with us tonight, but we're trying to get the right people in here to have these conversations. And everyone knows I'm an O-line guy. That's where my bread and butter is. I can talk D-line too, but if you want me to sit here and start talking about linebacker keys, I'm probably just going to make a fool of myself to the real ones. So I bring in the people that know what they're talking about. So and that's actually good. I want to hit on a couple of few terms that I think is going to kind of come up throughout the night. So Dennard, when we're talking linebacker keys or read keys, what are you referring to?
So it really depends. Old school defensive keys as a linebacker, you key the running backs. Well, that's obviously has graduated to the offensive line, and your keys kind of change depends on what, position you're playing as a linebacker. Obviously, middle linebacker, you're reading through the center. So if he blocks back, you're checking to see his pull, and then you're kind of reading through him, through the quarterback, through the running back. So you have to see the whole thing, because obviously you can't see the kind of guards, tackles, and seeing kind of pass sets. And the center, most times or not, will tell you where the play is going for the rare occasions. Sam linebacker and Will linebacker, depending on strong, weak, their keys are kind of the same. It's guard, tackle. Occasionally Sam will read the tackle depending on if he's on a line of scrimmage or if he's stacked behind the defensive end. So in essence, you're reading the guards or tackles at blocking down. You're checking to see if guard's pulling. If he's, pass setting, obviously you're looking to see draw first, then you're getting out. So there's a lot of things that go into your keys, but the basics starts with the offensive line and then reading through to the running backs. You never want to read running backs forward because running backs more times than not are going to lie to you.
And that you just brought up. So I was going to bring this up because it amazed me this year when we started deploying on offense. I know I'm switching gears a little bit, but I do want to hit on this because I do think it's relevant. When we started running the counter bash, and we have the running back with basically outside zone footwork going outside, but you have, depending on I know they make a line call when they get up to the line on whether it's guard tackle, center tackle being the pullers. Yep. We won't get into that, but it amazed me how much the linebackers would still get fooled because they're reading the running back and not the offensive line like you're talking about, because that would happen, right? If you're seeing, if you're reading the center as the mic and you see, him pull, but you're following the running back who's going the opposite way, your keys failed you. So I think that's a good example of how, our offense did. But I mean, this is one of those things where, even professionals don't stick to their basics, right?
Correct. And that's the beautiful part of why teams like Buffalo are very successful against Baltimore in terms of their defensive structure, because they are very disciplined. They understand their keys. They understand as a whole defense, they have to stick together to be great. A lot of other defenses, they have great players. Like we'll briefly talk about, Aaron Donald. Their defense is designed to get Aaron Donald as many pressures and sacks and to dominate the football game. That's what they're designed to do. Now, obviously, not every team is going to have an Aaron Donald. And when you don't and you think you can go do those things, you get exposed and then you're bottom half of the league in defense. When it comes to Buffalo, that's why I love watching Buffalo play. Everybody's on the same page. Everybody is buying in on the idea of if you do your job, your individual job, the whole thing works.
Right. The sum is greater than its individual parts. And that's team defense. And that's part of the reason when even though we had great players in Baltimore for so long, everyone did buy into that system and they had good leaders on, and that's one of the things, like you'll see guys freelance. We'll see Ray Lewis, like against a Darren Sproles on that fourth down, like we'll see him go off script. And that's what makes great players great. But generally speaking, the guys that kind of were the key cogs in the Ravens 3-4 system for so long, the Jarrett Johnsons, the Bart Scotts, like they bought into that game, that true team game, and stuck to the responsibilities, and that did free up the great players to be great.
Correct. And that's the beautiful part of being a part of a great defense and a very, very structurally based defense is it allows great players to make great plays within the system. They can take chances within the system because everything else is solid. It's when the system's not solid and people start taking chances is when you have 500-yard games, 600-yard games, and you're like, what happened? Why is the whole defense stinking? No, it was probably two guys the entire day.
Yeah. That was basically what happened when the Cowboys played us. Like the Cowboys, they have some solid players like Jalen Smith and Van Der Esch. Like no disrespect to their names, but they were the guys that I found the most were losing their fundamentals, losing their basic keys, and they're on the counter bash that Lamar scored on. Like you see Van Der Esch flow with the running back right from the snap. And that's a perfect example where you can see them lose that key. So I'm glad we hit on that.
Yes.
I want to jump right into the X's and O's because, I think it's going to tell us a lot. So, here we're looking at very base. This will be familiar to all Ravens fans. This is your base 3-4 defense. We got the rush linebacker on the left side. We got the Sam linebacker on the right side. We got a Mike and we got a Will. And this has really been the Ravens system for years now. It's always been kind of the base since I know the 2000 defense was a 4-3. And then I think it was around 2003 when they kind of transitioned to the 3-4, and that stuck around basically ever since. So Dennard, you're the expert here. Go through the front seven. What the heck am I looking at?
So here within this particular game now, once again, game plan always comes into play. So you can't always standardize how base is going to line up because teams' base packages offensively will change that. But Baltimore here is in essence what they're going to be in when the Eagles are in this formation, regardless of what they're doing. Now, if they're bringing blitzes or things along that sort, they're going to be overshifted. But 71 is overshifted because they know the Eagles in gun are going to throw the football or going to throw screens. So they're lined up in a way to protect themselves against screens, and they're protecting the mic to be able to run and get that running back on the screen. But this is your standard, obviously, outside linebackers walked up. You got your base three up front. They're still in their 5 and their 3, even though they're overshifted with the nose. So you still have all those things in place. So you still have all gaps integrity taken care of. You prepared for this, offensive formation, and it's, pretty standard straight up 3-4 stuff.
That's perfect. Yeah, and this was it took me a while. I popped open the Eagles game, and the Eagles play so many different formations, very similar to us. This was actually on 2nd and 6 to kind of I wanted to get that look of the 3-4, so I was looking for more because they actually started a nickel, and so I was trying to find when are we actually in our true 3-4, and this is something that I think we saw the Ravens do a lot with their line shifts. And it was something I saw a lot when we had Pierce and Brandon Williams, where Brandon Williams was playing more of a 3-tech, but what they did is because they had Pierce playing that 1-tech, nose shade type role, is they kind of shifted Williams more inside into like a 2Y from the 3-tech.
Yeah.
And so for those wondering, when we're talking techs, shades, it's pretty simple stuff. Like in between center and guard is your 1, in between guard and tackle is your 3, tackle tight end is your 5, and then when you're lined up directly over a player, it's an odd number. So you're a 0 over center, 2 over the guard, 4 over the tackle. So if you're just wondering what we're talking about there, that's what we're referring to. It's where the defensive lineman is lined up relative to the gap that he's covering. And so that's perfect. What we're looking at here. So again, if I'm the Mike here, I'm keying in on the center. That's who I'm reading first and foremost. If I'm the Will here, I'm reading their right guard to my left.
So Queen here is actually reading the guard center gap, because now he's kind of removed from his typical kind of in the gap reading. So his read now is technically the guard.
Okay.
And the Will linebacker, his read is technically the guard because of the formation. Now, the reason why the Ravens are in this is because the Eagles like to run a lot of – we do the same thing, but basically, in essence, it's counter. It's trap, and the guard's going to pull, and you don't want to be in a 1 and a 3 because it gives the angles to the offensive line to easily pin the 1, the pull, the guard, exactly. And now you're up on the Will, and it's 88 not the gate. So that's the other part of this alignment with the with this Eagles game as the Ravens are lined up. So they're protecting themselves against obviously the quick trap or the kind of the counter.
Yeah, and you love to down block on odd coverages, that's for sure.
Yes,
because they're in the gap waiting for you to block down on. So when I played left guard, we ran in high school a ton of traps. Like that was our bread and butter, because they had small. We had the guard that played beside me was about same size as me, and I'm pretty undersized for playing guard, but we love to get guys out and get guys moving and kind of play a speed game. So when I'd line up and I knew I had to down block against like a guy that's double my size. I just love that he was already there, just waiting to be down blocked. So
yeah,
let's go in and let's shift to the 4-3. So this was against the Titans, and so our buddy Mike, that I knew you were gonna love this. Our buddy Mike that I asked to go through, and I said go through and find me some 4-3s, and and this might be a good thing to ask you because I'd love to get your opinion on it. A lot of these 4-3s were run against the Tennessee Titans.
Yes, they are.
So, Dennard, why would we do that?
It is much easier to defend the zone inside and outside in a 4-man front with 3 linebackers. It's sounder, it's easier, it's cleaner for the secondary to check their reads in terms of tight ends, releasing, offensive linemen getting out of there, whatever is going on up front. This right here is your standard base defense. And the Titans are even in what we call ace, which is 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers. So even at this point, the Ravens are not even worried about it because the tight ends are removed from the line of scrimmage. Now, I bet if we had another screenshot and those tight ends were moved onto the line of scrimmage, I guarantee those linebackers would be stacked behind the defensive ends.
Yeah.
Because once again, yes, in essence, the 4-3 allows you to be a one-gap team, and it makes it easier in zone because everybody's read is defined as soon as the ball is snapped. But also, when a team goes 2 tight ends and you're an ace, now the linebackers have 2 gaps they have to take care of, but it becomes 1 gap as soon as flow is identified. So it once again puts you in a position defensively where you can control the zone game with 7 in the box. And now you can leave your secondary to do any cleanup, to take care of any of the tight ends who smash and release out into the flat, or any play action bites that may happen. And if you notice in the Tennessee game, in the playoff game, after the first series, when the Ravens were getting picked off and drags and everything of the sort, they literally went 4-3 zone coverage and said, you're not going to run the football anymore, and you're not going to pick us off. And Tennessee had no answer.
Yeah. And that's, as someone that's, coached O-line, played on the O-line, I coach an inside zone predominant system, and it is much easier for my guys to go out there and stack a guy and reach the second level when it's more guys on the line. It's just simpler to hit those double teams, take over and climb, versus now, if we're looking at this specific example, so say this is hypothetically, I don't even know what the play call was, but say it's an inside zone right. So you got the right guard, right tackle here. They're going to probably, right tackle is going to chip down on Wolf here, and then he's going to have to reach board, which is fine, but that right guard is going to have to take him over. The center has to chip and reach the mic, but that is a tough block to make there because he's got to get the left guard to take over, and the mic with Patrick Queen's speed is going to be able to react and shoot that A gap or, take that cut back away. And so that is where, if they have the extra down lineman, it's simple, closer proximity, and there's less linebackers to reach. And those linebacker reaches can be tough. And I do think with less base defenses being played, more 4-2 alignments being played, I think that's why zone is becoming so popular, because you can run it out of 11 personnel with 3 wide receivers and take advantage of the numbers because you have 4 linemen but only 2 linebackers. So it's less about the linemen, it's more about the number of linebackers you have to reach and make a play on, because even the will on this play, if it's going right, he can still make a play on the ball just by sheer speed and coming unblocked. That left tackle there, that's going to be his man. If it's inside zone right, that's a tough ass block to make on a will linebacker there.
Yes, and that's the beautiful part of this. And back in the day, and Ray was where Queen is right now. Ray would press the hole.
Yeah.
So the zone was a wrap. that's why, famously against the Tennessee Titans in the playoffs back in the day, why the Ravens had such success against Eddie George is because they played a 4-3 and they were physical. Not only that, you had Sam Adams and Terry Saragusa, who just ate up center guard tackle and let Bulware and Jamie Sharper and Ray Lewis run all over the place. But that's the beautiful design of the 4-3 is it allows your linebackers, when the linebackers are the strength of your team, you want to play 4-3.
Right. And so I know we're heading this way. So let's take a step back. So I know you're a 4-3 guy, and I wish Mike was here because I know Mike's a 3-4 guy, and I know Mike lives defense. Yep. So why 4-3 for you? Explain it to me.
Why 4-3? Okay. 4-3 for me is A, is what I grew up on.
Right.
But B, it gives you I think it gives you a better foundation against the run. And I grew up in a defense with a defensive coordinator where if you stop the run and make them one-dimensional, then you can go have fun with your exotic packages in terms of zone blitzes. Now, you can't get as exotic in a four-man front, but I think you can get more direct pressure in a 4-3. So for me, it's all about stopping the run and being more protected in the pass game because I have 3 linebackers and I can now play cover 2 with 5 under, 2 deep. I can run quarters coverage and maybe have a linebacker buzz underneath a 8-yard out, which is kind of what the weakness is in the 4-3 alignment because of not having the outside linebacker there to even deter that. But once again, I'm willing as a defensive coordinator to give up a 7-8 yard throw out there. If you're going to take that, eventually you're going to get inside of the 30 and you can't have that throw anymore.
Right.
Now you got to come play football.
Right.
And if I keep you out of the end zone and I keep you under 20 points, I have done my job as a defensive coordinator.
Correct. And so so I guess one of my thoughts would be in the 3-4 just by, and we've seen Wink do this masterfully, just by having stand-up linebackers.
Oh yeah.
It seems to lend you to a little bit more versatile usage. And that's why I think he can get so much out of his disguising blitzes and dropping the outside linebackers. And, I know not every team does that the way Wink does, but does the 4-3, in your opinion, give you that same type of versatility, or is the 3-4 going to give you a little bit more versatility?
3-4 is definitely going to give you more versatility.
And so that's where, if I'm Mike and I'm just trying to put myself in Mike's shoes, I think that's what Mike's coming in with. And so, and I think that's a good example of it really.
Yes.
Because I know we're going to get into this, and your base defense, and this is why, I know everyone's playing multiple fronts, everyone's playing different looks, everyone's reducing into sub packages, but your base defense impacts your team building. And this is a perfect example because if I'm Eric DeCosta, and I'm building Wink Martindale's 3-4 defense, I'm thinking of that when I'm making a pick like Dalen Hayes, when I'm picking guys like, Patrick Queen, Malik Harrison. If you go back and watch Malik Harrison at OSU, you're seeing him play a lot of Mike, a lot of Will, but you're also seeing him play Sam. And that's the versatile role that he can come in and do for you. And so, as much as, like I said at the start of the show, we're only playing base 23% of snaps, basically 1 out of every 4 snaps. But it is impacting how I build my team because you build to your base.
Yes, absolutely. 110%. And I love what the 3-4 brings in terms of packages, versatility, how you can bring your blitzes, when you can bring it, how you can disguise it, because you can literally involve all 11 guys.
Right.
And that's the beautiful part of it. It causes a lot of confusion. And for me and everything of the sort, I even use some of it when I want to get into my pressure packages because it's so unique in being able to do that. Now, my issue with the 3-4 is twofold. One, unless you have a stud nose tackle, you're going to have issues against the run. It's that's why Pittsburgh has never dropped off, because they've had studs at defensive at nose tackle. Baltimore, when Brandon Williams is healthy and active and rolling, that's why people can't move the ball. Even when Brandon Williams was out and it was Michael Pierce who was trying to replicate it, he couldn't really do it because it's a unique skill that very few individuals can do. Kind of why they had to let Michael Pierce go, not because he wasn't a great individual and couldn't play at a very high level at what we do in here in Baltimore, but he's not a scheme fit anymore in terms of he couldn't be a 3, he can't be a 5, and you can't pay 2 nose tackles ridiculous money unless you're in a 4-3 and now you kick Brandon Williams out to a 3 or kick Michael Pierce out to a 3, tell him to lose 30 pounds and go get it.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's important because I personally, like, I think very highly of Brandon Williams. I've never really been I've seen his value, throughout his entire contract, regardless of the dollar amount. And it's mostly because of exactly what we're talking about. But when we had that lineup in 2019, was it 20? Yeah. Anyway, it was 2019. I felt like we were hurt a little bit when we had to move B. Will to the 3 tech. And it's not really anything about Brandon Williams. It's anytime you move anyone out of their position, they're not going to be. And Michael Pierce said that when he left. He specifically said, Brandon's moving back to his natural position, and that's only going to benefit him. And so I think it's just one of those things where I completely agree with you. I think this fits the narrative we've heard from DaCosta himself say, I want to build a strong middle of my defense. So in your opinion, when we're talking about that the importance of the nose tackle in a 3-4 defense, which we know the Ravens, they value it because Brandon Williams was brought in, Brandon Williams was paid, and Brandon Williams isn't going anywhere from everything we've heard. Do you see that same concept at the linebacker position with a Mike? Is it as important in that middle of the defense concept as the nose tackle?
Yes, because Queen's going to be very good. Queen's now bulked up. You can kind of see it noticeably about 10, 15 pounds around his shoulders. He's also very young. So he's in a learning phase. He's going to be very good. So is Malik Harrison. I think, in particular in a 3-4, you have to have really good inside linebackers who can do both. Right. If you don't, you're going to end up in a situation where we were in 2018. No knock on C.J. Mosley and Peanut, but you struggle immensely in pass coverage to start with because you only have 2 linebackers in the middle of the field. So when you're limited as an inside linebacker in pass coverage and you have 1 less, you saw the middle of the field as a problem. Fast forward now, in the run game with Patrick Queen, you saw a young guy who he saw what he saw and went too fast. I can slow that down. If I'm a coach, I can slow that down. That's easy. That's the easiest thing as a linebacker, is to slow someone down. What the hardest thing as a linebacker is to speed someone up.
Right.
And speed up their process. When you do that, you miss tackles, you miss reads, you start guessing, your eyes go to the back because you're always thinking. Patrick Queen doesn't need to think. He knows how to play linebacker. What everyone has to understand is he's got to learn the nuances that he did not learn at LSU because he was only there for a very short time.
Right. And very little starting experience, given he didn't even start in his last year at the start of the season.
Correct. So,
which is crazy when you kind of think about it conceptually. Like, that is absolutely insane.
None. and then ask that man to come in a pandemic with no OTAs, really no camp, and to start in the middle of a defense that we understand as fans is one of the most complicated things in the world to understand in terms of terminology, verbiage, and the way they play some of their man-zone, man-free concepts, some of their matchup zones that they do. That stuff will make your head spin if you're not paying attention. And we saw that sometimes, particularly against Kansas City, when Patrick Queen was kind of a little bit on the spins. And as a linebacker who's played it, I've been there. When your head is literally spinning the entire game because you don't know the screen's coming out from the left. You don't know if it's coming from the right. You don't know if the tight end's cracking. And then when you watch the film, you literally like, if I was just relaxed and watched the line in front of me, if I watch my keys, everything else is just window dressing. The lineman will take me to the ball.
Right. And that right there, and I've heard you say that before, and that is probably the biggest thing I've learned. And I know we're going to have you back. I think that's where we can have you back to kind of talk about, we can bring up some of those Kansas City plays and kind of look at, where did he read? Where did his eyes go? But I think you nailed it perfectly. And it's part of the reason I've had this argument with so many people, and they've been like, how can you be high on Queen? And, I kind of have felt the same. I felt that, he really does just need to slow down, and you could see over pursuing of gaps. And to be honest, coming out of LSU, that was one of the criticisms that I had of him watching his film was I felt that he overshot his gap. He would be against an outside zone, he'd get over to the C gap and it was just a back cut into the B gap where he just wasn't there. And that's going to come from exactly what you're talking about. It's going to be staying calm, staying patient, staying true to your keys. And that's one of the things that I think is deeply, deeply important, is staying true to those keys.
And if you're paying attention, that is why they brought in Rob Ryan. If you're paying attention, I'll say it again. If you're paying attention, this is why they brought in Rob Ryan. Because Rob Ryan understands how to slow down linebackers. Ray Lewis was fast when he got here. Bart Scott was fast when he got here. We saw what they can do. It's literally, you have to convince Queen in his mind that he's fast enough. You don't have to overcommit. You're fast enough. And as soon as that hits his mind and he continues to hear that and understands I'm fast enough, because he is, he's and now he's adding the strength. And I think that was part of it, was he felt a little light and he felt like he had to get over top everything. You're probably going to see a different man this year who's going to be probably pressing the line of scrimmage a little bit more, understand his physicality, and understand that he can shed and get there with his tremendous speed.
And that's something, the first episode we did of this show, and I'll leave the link in the description if you're watching now and you didn't catch it. We talked about the new coaching additions, and, all the buzz has been about Keith Williams and T. Martin, and, Lord knows I'm excited to have them here. No doubt about it. But when we talked about who is our favorite addition, it was Rob Ryan for me, because that is to get a guy with, I think it was 31 years coaching experience, a guy that's ran defenses. He's ran every unit you can run, but he's been at the helm. He's been at the head of a defense. And now we are bringing him with two, pieces of clay that he can mold in Patrick Queen and Malik Harrison. And I love that we have LJ Fort here to be a stabilizing force and provide that veteran leadership. And, that's perfect. But I do fully expect, I'll commit to this right now, that, week 10 after the bye, week 12, whatever it is, I think we're going to see a heavy, heavy dose of Malik Harrison and Patrick Queen. and I think you're going to see tremendous steps forward.
I couldn't agree more, and I would add this last point with Ryan is he brings an edge. And I would say this defense is kind of, if there's one piece of this they're missing, is a little bit of that nasty someone walk up and kind of extra knee or an extra kind of, just to let people know that we're not going to be, messing around anymore. And you saw a little bit of that with Deshaun Elliott, and you saw a little bit with that with Peters, but that's from the secondary. You need someone up front who's gonna have a little edge, who's gonna talk to someone, who's gonna tell that old lineman that you miss me, you miss my boy. Yeah. Those things that Suggs did, that Ray did, that Bart Scott did, that those individuals not only played well, but they talked a little bit to get in your head a little bit more. It made job a little bit easier because now you're thinking about something else. You're not thinking about football. You're thinking about me talking crap to you. And that's the essence of playing defense is you got to have a little snarl. You got to have a little nastiness. Not everybody. I need one or two guys.
Yeah.
Who and I think Malik Harrison can be a little bit of that bully. And you saw that in the Tennessee game.
Damn right.
They said, "Okay, big man, you go out there. You show us why we picked you in the third round." And he went out there. He dominated with McPhee. Those two cats shut down anything Tennessee wanted to do in the B and the C gap all day long.
And so again, I wish I should have grabbed film. It's always best to grab film, but
yes,
I think the reason. And, I think this really kind of drives home what we've talked about tonight. I think the reason that Malik Harrison did so well, and when he, I think Patrick Queen can learn a lot from going back and what is he played patient. He stuck his gap and he read it and he stayed true to the key. And then he shed the block and he was in the right spot to make the play on the ball. And, it's one of those things where you can go back and watch and it's just his movement style. It's slow. It's calculated. It's angle based.
He understands how to play linebacker. You see him move with a grace. You see LJ Fort move with a grace.
Yeah.
Queen moves with
Energizer
anger.
Bunny.
With anger and arrives in a bad mood. We just need to dial it back a second and arrive in a bad mood, but arrive on time in a bad mood.
Yeah.
That's all you need. That's all he needs to change.
I love it. I wasn't expecting to go into Queen and Harrison, but I'm glad we did because I think the things that we're talking about and the advantages of the 3-4 defense and specifically the keys, I think it's going to play really well into having these two cats here, especially with how they've built around them. Adding a true kind of what I think is going to be a weapon for Wink in Odafe Owe, true versatile outside linebacker, and even Dalen Hayes, who is going to be playing behind Bowser this year at the Sam position, a guy that, he did a ton of off-ball work. So I think it's going to be, again, in that same concept where we're running the 3-4 base. We're going to be a little bit more versatile, but we're going to be putting a little bit more pressure on our inside linebackers, like you talked about in the 4-3 first 3-4 pass coverage from your linebackers. You have two guys covering the same amount of space that you have three guys covering. And I think that's kind of the lack of nuance we had when we got some of the commentary on Peanut and CJ Mosley, especially in Dean P's system, because I personally felt he played a lot more of that kind of cover 2, Tampa 2 look defense. Those zones are huge. And so it's not that it's necessarily an excuse. It's just the reality of how much pressure you're putting on those linebackers. And so I think it's going to happen with Queen and Harrison. They're going to have that pressure too. They're going to have some large areas to cover. But I think if they can really channel in on Queen unlocking that next step, they both have the athleticism to do it. And I think they both kind of have that type of potential to make a major impact in this league.
I would agree with that. And I don't think we give someone else enough credit, and that's Bowser. I think he is the ultimate key of making all of this work this year. because he's so good in coverage. He adds something that we hadn't had at any point that I can remember as an outside linebacker who is that versatile, who's that gifted in terms of coverage, but also able to give you the rush and everything of the sort. So having him is a major piece of them being a little more confident in their pass coverage because of him.
Yeah,
so
and
you might see a little more with them with that.
I wonder if that would lead to more of those kind of 4-3 under looks where, we talked about this, and I meant to bring it up. So there's been a lot of talk about the 3-4 base, the 4-3 under being are we running a 4-3 under? Are we running a 3-4? They're pretty much the same looking. So what are the differences? And I think it's a good example of how we can use the 4-3 under, where basically all 4-3 under does is it shifts your D line a little bit, and it drops that Sam linebacker that would be a off ball in a 4-3. It drops him down to the line of scrimmage as a Sam, which is why it gets that simulated 3-4 look. But I think the big difference is the defensive end that would be our rush linebacker in a 3-4 is down in a 3-point as a D end. And so that's really, you have a down 3-point stance D lineman on one side and a standing up linebacker playing the Sam on the other. So I think that's a good example of how we can use some 4-3 concepts, shift it to an under, and actually start using a little bit more of a 4-3 concept.
And I think you saw a little bit of that sprinkled in with Harrison and Queen and Bowser when they were on the field. And in that picture you showed as a 4-3, they can easily get into that 3-4 under look, and Bowser is very comfortable being on the line of scrimmage. So that's why, like you said, Harrison will be on the field by week 10 and week 12. To me, if he's not, after you get out of that first month of September where you got 3 or 4 on the road, I see no reason why you're not home for literally the next month and a half.
Yeah, it's like 6 games. It's absurd.
Yeah, like, why not? Like, I understand he needs to get into the groove of this, and you have Fort. But I think if you're Harbaugh and you always harp on putting the best 11 guys on the field, he's one of the best 11 guys on defense that needs to be on the field.
Yeah.
And I understand the stability that Fort gives you, the veteran leadership, but what the defense lacks, and we'll kind of wrap this into how to construct your team and why 4-3-3-4, cheaper, more expensive, all that other stuff. We'll get into that here shortly. But turnovers is the name of the game. And when you're in a 4-3, it's a lot easier to be structurally sound that cause issues with turnovers and things of that sort. 3-4 is great, blitzes and things of that sort, but you're not getting turnovers. And I think that's why you're seeing kind of this move and being more flexible. And teams are like, well, what are you, 3-4, 4-3? You got to get the best 11 guys on the field, and Harrison gives you that, and Harrison gets you the turnover that you need to get and do the different things that you want to do on defense.
And we saw that from Bowser doing drops from the Sam linebacker position and playing, even though it is a 3-4 base look, when he drops down, you got 3 linebackers in coverage. You're able to do some of those more 4-3 principal concepts in coverage from the linebackers. And so that is where I think you're getting at. I completely agree. And that you actually just raised something that I kind of want to get into, because we've talked about it a little bit, and it's a really interesting concept. So when we're talking about cost effectiveness from a team building perspective, tell me about that with the 3-4 versus the 4-3.
So perfect example is the Ravens. So look at the team that the 2000 Ravens, 4-3. You had studs everywhere. money thrown in the defense, everything in a sort. Not very much spent on offense because you drafted who you drafted. You brought in Trent Dilfer, you brought in, Shannon Sharp, and that was a difference. So as the salary cap age has come in, and the Ravens wanted to be more of a defensive team, but you wanted to cause more chaos. In 4-3, you're kind of at the mercy of the teams you're playing, so you get into a lot of these 17-10 games, 14-13 games, and the Ravens probably felt like with the offense that they had at that point, probably wasn't a good idea to get into those type of games. So we need to cause havoc, and I think when you saw the drafting of Suggs and Reed and you going that way, that kind of go that way. But that also means 3-4 is expensive. It is expensive. It's expensive because you need – not only do you need a stud defensive nose tackle, but you need stud outside linebackers. You need a stud who can get to the quarterback. You need a stud who can not only stop the run but get out in pass coverage. Those guys don't grow on trees.
Versatility costs money. Just look at Matt Judon. Look at what Matt Judon costs. Versatility it pays.
When's the last time you saw the Ravens pay an outside linebacker? Besides Suggs, and it took them 2
franchise tags
to do that. So they really don't want to pay those type of guys because they eat up a lot of cap space. So fast forward to why I love the 4-3. And look at Buffalo as the perfect example. They have a ton of money going into their offense. Josh Allen. They've got the receivers now. They got to pay. They're paying their entire offensive line. They pay 1 corner. That's it. They don't pay anybody else in their defense.
Yeah.
Because everybody believes in that structure. And that's what you get with a bunch of guys playing in a 4-3 who understand, but also it's cheaper because you can find guys who can play the 3 technique and play it efficiently, get up the field, 1 gap. Nose tackle, 1 technique. You can find guys who can get up the field and hold that. That's easy to find. You can find linebackers who can flow. You can find linebackers. If I'm supposed to be in a C gap, I need to get to the C gap. That's why in our conversations, and the Ravens have to pay Lamar Jackson. They're going to have to pay Andrews if he's going to stay around. They're going to have to pay J.K. Dobbins if they want him to stay around. They're going to have to pay offensive linemen eventually.
Yep.
So if you're going to do that and you're going to make this commitment to Lamar, then you have to figure out cost effectively, how do you do that? And right now they're doing that in a draft on the 3-4. But eventually you're going to have to make a decision.
And I think your theory makes a ton of sense because we just saw them let 2 outside linebackers walk and hit the market. And, we were kind of left going into the draft and it's like, okay, well, we got Bowser, who, we paid, but we got on a very cost-effective deal. Kudos to EDC on that one. And we got, then we have McPhee and Ferg, and that's terrifying going into the draft because McPhee can't play a full slate. Ferg hasn't looked, the part of a starter. And so what do is they turn around and, like you said, invest in draft capital. And so, I think it makes a ton of sense. I think it would be a very big I wouldn't even say it'd be a big shift in terms of what Wink does so well because we've seen him deploy it properly and use it well. And he just seems like that kind of defensive coordinator, very different from Dean Pease, who I've always felt Dean Pease had a system and, it was really on the players to come in and execute that system.
Yes.
And that's not really what I've seen from Wink so far. I've seen him adapt to who is on his squad. And so if he sits down and they're like, look, we got to get cheaper. We got to get cheaper on defense. I can't pay these guys. What can you do? That's what you're referring to. And I think it adds up. It makes a ton of sense. I think the Buffalo example is a perfect example. No, it was really well explained. So, I think, that was a good run through. I hit everything I wanted to talk. Do you have any last final thoughts that you want to hit on this topic?
No, I enjoy everything about defense, 4-3 and everything of the sort. And I will always go to my grave pounding the woodwork for 4-3 in Baltimore.
I love it.
but I understand, and to your point about Wink, is and why this works and why Eric DeCosta can do what he's doing is because they have the staff in place that says, we have a system here now. It's almost like they've taken the college mentality and said, I have a system. I'm not going to change it. And you kind of saw that in 2017 and 18, where they say we have to build an offense around Lamar. Well, they're not going to throw Lamar into, a West Coast offense. He's not going to be successful. So it's the same adage in the corporate world. Are you going to take a talented individual and pigeonhole him into something that's not going to fit his skill set? No. You're going to develop something to take advantage of that. If not, that talented person is going to leave. So the Ravens took this college mindset and said, we're going to build systems. And we're going to find guys, we're going to identify guys who fit those systems and fits that scheme. And we're going to continue to draft those type of guys. And we know what moles there are. They're always looking for this type of Suggs guy. They know the Haloti type that works in the system. But they also know they have to adapt, like you said, to their personnel. And you kind of saw that. And you saw that in the middle of the year. It was kind of forced by COVID, particularly the Colts game. And you kind of saw a different Wink. And I think you saw the evolution of Wink after that game. And I think you might see a different Wink against Kansas City the first time around.
I think so too. And I think it makes a ton of sense. And it's one of those things where I think their model, basically what the model is on defense right now, is really going to be tested in the next 2 years with Oweh and Hayes added to this group that they're going to deploy in a, and I think you saw Oweh play that way at Penn State, where it was very system oriented. I mean, that was one of the funny things. I was watching his film. I think he had 12 rushes in the first half of a game. 7 of those 12, he ran an inside knife for a stunt. And so he's used to being in a system oriented role where he's executing a role within the system. He can buy into, we're better together than we are alone. And so that's something where, not everyone gets there. And I think we saw a little bit of that with Matt Judon, where, I think he wanted to freelance and get away from it a little bit, and it kind of burnt him a few times. And so I think it's going to be a big test of, if this is their model and they want to use the draft to kind of backfill these guys that they just can't afford to pay because they're just so expensive. Like that's Ngakoue and Judon combined. If we re-sign them is taking up no Zietler is here, no money for Andrews next year. If they want to make a play on Julio, nope, not happening because we're paying 2 outside linebackers. It just can't be done when we're going to be paying the offense what we're paying it. And so it's exciting times because we are seeing a shift, and we're going to see them do it with a 3-4 alignment. And I think it's really going to be interesting to see how that pans out.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it as well.
Well, man, thank you so much for joining us again and giving us your time and your expertise. Like I said, you're going to be back. I'm not even going to, it's not a goodbye. It's a see you soon. But no, thank you, man. Thank you everybody for spending the time with us. We want to hear what you guys have to say. Use the comment section below. Be sure to like the video. If you want to find your way back here, hit that subscribe button. And if you want to hear more in the podcast series, the comment section, use Twitter. Let me know what you want to hear us talk about, because I want to give you guys what you guys want. But that's it for us tonight. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. Peace out.
Go Dukes.